Welcome to In the News for June the 17th, 2022. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
Hi, Jeff. I feel like as long as we went last week covering all of the announcements from WWDC, we still didn't get through all of them. How about let's just quickly, we can do this kind of briefly, although you and I get so excited about this. Let us tie up a couple of those loose ends. And you already took care of this, at least on one end for us. Earlier this week, a couple of days ago, you had a post on iPhone JD about the best new features in watchOS 9. I don't even think we covered watchOS last week, and there's some great stuff coming in this as well.
Yeah, there's great stuff in here. There's, I started by talking about some improvements on the notifications. If you're using your watch, you'll just see a little banner at the top of the screen. But, Apple realizes that what Apple Watch is most useful for is notifications. So they have some improvements there.
Yeah,
but really the health stuff is what people love using their Apple Watch for. And from so many different angles, they improved it. Anyone that uses the built-in workout app, you're going to see, all sorts of improvements. One of the most noticeable ones being that you can now get different information on your screen. Right now, when you're working out, you glance at your screen and you see like 4 or 5 lines of information, which has things like, your heart rate and how long you've been going for and stuff like that, which is nice. But this new system is you'll be able to use the digital crown to scroll to get to multiple pages of information. And there's all sorts of useful things in here that they've never had before. Things like if you're going up hills, what your elevation is and stuff like that. There's one that I didn't even I forgot to put a picture of it in my post, but a lot of people keep track of their heart rate, not just in the number, but in terms of like a zone, based upon your personal information.
Yeah, my wife does that.
This zone is medium, this zone is high. And some people like to work out that way. And so you can you'll be very easy to glance at your watch and see what zone you're in. And then Apple has this thing called power that talks about how much power you're exerting based upon, multiplicating some things together. But the idea is that people, the statistics make it interesting. It's sort of the gamification of improving yourself. And I enjoy it. So why not give people more options to have more types of information that they display? And it's great. And even if you're running or whatever you're doing, or on a treadmill or working out, just flipping up on the digital crown should be a pretty easy gesture to use to switch to more information. So that's one thing that I like. And sort of related to that one and is the Fitness Plus improvements, because much like if you're working out with just your watch, you can see more things on your watch. If you're doing a Fitness Plus workout, you can see more things on the screen, whether it's a television screen or your iPhone or your iPad. And I particularly like that at the very top, right underneath the time, they say things like, all out or something like that, just to sort of, it's something that the coach would probably be saying too, but it's just a more of a positive indication that, this is the part of the workout where you need to be giving it your all, and then we're going to have a cool down period afterwards. So I think these are nice changes to enhance working out with an Apple Watch.
If I recall correctly, didn't they say something else that the watch will now start tracking? And you had another link to a story here. I didn't get the chance to read it. The 7 new features that might make you ditch your Garmin for an Apple Watch in runner's world. That when we run, sometimes we bob up and down. Right. And then don't I remember, didn't they show something about that in the keynote, that the watch is now going to measure like how high you're bobbing up and down, which I guess, frankly, when I think about it, I think, am I being harder on my knees because I'm, lifting up too much, that kind of a thing? Am I correct in that?
They did talk about that at the keynote too, and they had a name for it, and it's not occurring to me right now.
I know,
but it's just a more sophisticated.
I like bobbing.
Yeah, it's a more sophisticated way to track your the cadence of your run and walk and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, which makes sense because as Apple collects all of this information, they can sort of throw their artificial intelligence at it and see what else can we pull out from this once you have this large sample size of information. So I think these are great improvements, and I think that people are going to really appreciate them. What was really interesting to me was the specific one that they advertised was or previewed was the AFib abilities. Because if you're somebody who has been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation, that your heart sign your heartbeat could become irregular at certain times during the day. And in the current world, if you want to get tested for that, sure, you can go into your doctor's office and have them test you, see how you're doing for an hour. But what you really want is something that you're wearing all day long, perhaps even 24
Yeah,
hours a day if you sleep with
monitoring.
it, monitoring you, so you can really get a true history of it. And so this is a feature that should be coming, and that they're getting FDA approval for it. And so it will help people with this particular condition. But so it's fantastic. Great news. Thumbs up. But what I
Yeah,
particularly like about it is this, I think, is the first step towards the future. Up until now, the
yeah,
Apple Watch has had health related things that it could do, but they did not yet have the peer review testing to have FDA approval and stuff like that. This is
right,
one of the first
right.
that is getting it. So you just got to think that more is going to be coming in the future. They now have, for years now, Apple has been working with medical institutions and university research programs to do studies with the Apple Watch. And so as the studies come in and they peer review the science and everything else, they can get more and more approval. So it wouldn't surprise me if 5 years from now the Apple
Right.
Watch does a whole host of new things, not even just because the sensors are new, although I think that's going to be true as well, but just because it's been around enough and it's been tested
Right.
enough that they're
Right.
going to get approval for this new stuff. So that's really
Wow.
exciting to me.
I honestly, I feel like Apple needs to split into several companies. You have Apple
Mhm.
Computers, and that's a very small part of what they're doing now, because you have Apple Music, you have
Mhm.
Apple TV, I mean, the streaming service. You have Apple Health, and I think we'll talk in just a couple of minutes about Apple Financial. I
Mhm.
mean, there's just so many things that they are focusing on and really just hitting it out of the park on this. And you did a good job, I think, of emphasizing, I think, the importance of this. But I don't know if we fully grasp like how really truly important this is, that in a few years from now, you've kind of alluded to this before, Jeff, in a few years from now we're going to be like, well, yeah, why wouldn't you be wearing an Apple Watch? Like you must, like that's the way you're going to monitor your health in day to day.
Yeah. A couple more things that I think are worth mentioning, and one's related to health, which is medications.
Yeah,
This is low hanging fruit. This is something they could have done a while ago. A lot
right,
of us,
right.
and I do it now too. Certain medication you're supposed to take at certain times in the day. You just set
Hmm.
a reminder. You remind me at such and such a time at every day to take this medication. But that's just a simple reminder that I set up myself. Apple's going to have a built-in medications. This is going to be part of the iPhone with iOS 16, and it'll work with the Apple Watch too. So your iPhone will be able to keep track of all your medications, which you can apparently enter just by like scanning the bottles and stuff, and it will know it. And I think we may have mentioned last week that the
Yeah,
iPhone will
yeah,
be smart enough to tell you if two different medications are
right,
contraindicated. Hopefully,
right,
your healthcare professional will tell you that as well.
right.
But
It's
additionally, it works with the Apple Watch, because the Apple Watch is the thing. You're when you're at home, you may not have your phone in your pocket all the time, but your Apple Watch is going to be on your wrist, and so
right.
that's the perfect thing to be tapping you and say, now is the time to take this pill, and now is the time to do this. I think for anyone, but especially older people that may be taking even more pills and have more schedules, this is great. So this is a simple one that they could have done a
Yeah.
while ago, but I love that it's coming. And the one that you have on the screen right now that I also like, you and I were talking the other week about what happens with the dock on the Apple Watch. I was saying that
Right,
the dock
right,
controls the things that are your favorites, and you were saying, oh no, the dock actually controls the things that you've been using most recently. It turns
right.
out that we were both right. That's
Both
just a
right.
setting on the iPhone as to which it displays. I had mine set one way and you're set the other way. But
Right,
regardless of which way you have that set, whenever you get to the dock, what you really want to have at the top, or the thing, what you're most likely to want to switch to, is
right.
something that you were using most recently. And so that's a change that they're making to the dock, which just makes perfect sense to me.
Yes,
So it'll
yes.
be even
Agreed.
easier to switch screens. And we may talk about this later, but there were so many announcements Apple made last week where you could almost see a common thread from the different devices. And here's one that,
Yes.
much like the new Stage Manager on the iPad and on the Mac gives you easier ability to switch between applications. Here we are on the Apple Watch, the
Yep.
smallest of Apple devices, with
Yep.
an improved way to switch between the running applications. So it's
Right.
again, a lot of these themes come back and forth. The last thing that's probably worth mentioning are the watch faces. This
New
is,
faces.
they have 4 new ones. They're fun. They're nice. There are 3 new ones plus one improved one.
Right.
They're nice. They're fun. I think people may like Metropolitan. Some of them are a little childish. That's fine. Nothing wrong with having fun. It's bittersweet to me, because I so
Yeah.
want them to come up with a way for third-party developers to make their own
Yeah.
watch faces.
Yeah.
There are so many smart Apple developers.
Right.
That even if Apple gave them a very restrictive, kit of things that they could do, people would come up with
They would do great.
incredibly amazing
Right.
Apple Watch
Right.
faces. even if Apple decided that they had to sort of act as a gatekeeper and not everything
Right.
could go out the door. So
Right.
I will just continue to hope that one of these years Apple does that. But until they do that, then
Yeah.
they're just going to have to release the new watch faces themselves, and they have some interesting ones coming out.
Yeah.
Nothing mind blowing.
Whew. Okay, so that's that's Watch OS 9, not a new hardware watch, although we're always hopeful about that in the fall, right? But this is the operating system that runs on the watch, which is now called Watch OS, and that was obviously what they discussed at WWDC, and you did a great post on it this past week on that, Jeff. So okay, we talked about the watch.
Before we transition to the next topic, because this again is this idea of something that works on one platform working on another one.
Yes.
One of the changes to the Apple Watch not that long ago was the ability to have the watch on all the time. So my watch, even if I don't pick up my wrist, I can glance down at it and I can still see the time with it always on screen. And this might be a rumor, or this might just be some detective work, but since the developers have gotten their hands on the beta versions of the next iOS operating system, which comes out this fall, they have been reporting that they have seen something in there that makes them think that the next version of the iPhone might have an always on screen, much like the newest Apple Watches have too. And this sort of ties into lock screens and stuff that, we talked before about how the new lock screen in the iPhone can display lots of useful information. It may be, my iPhone's on my desk right now, and if I glance down at it, all I see is a black screen on my current iPhone. But it, based upon what developers have seen just at the the programming language level of the new beta. So who knows, that would not surprise me based on what the reports that have come out in the last week, that we may see an always on screen for the next version of the iPhone. Just something to think about for this fall.
Absolutely. And it occurs to me, there have been other phones that have something similar, maybe not the full screen, Android, but I know some phones, have like the clock on there, and that would be wonderful, even just having the clock on there. But again, this comes back to a theme we talk about all the time. It's like Apple ain't going to do that unless they know that they can streamline the battery usage and whatever else that they want to do so that it doesn't run down, because they don't want to have people complaining that the battery is run down. So anyway, that's a good point there, and I'm glad. And yeah, that has definitely been a theme that we're seeing some different platforms in the Apple ecosystem kind of borrow or take some other things that maybe iPad took some from the Mac. Anyway, we can come back to that, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that over the next few weeks. Okay, now maybe finally we got through the watch. Although, man, we just keep talking about it. Everybody knows that both you and I, Jeff, are big fans of the Apple Watch. But let's talk also about, I think, just did Tim Cook or Craig mention Apple TV at all in the keynote? I don't even think it was mentioned anything. So thank you for providing a few links that this past week that people were trying to, we're finding some things that, hey, there were some improvements that are going to be coming out for the Apple TV. And this is the one that you linked to from Joe Rossignol at Mac Rumors.
Yeah, so when this fall, when everything else gets updated, tvOS 16 will come out as well. And it's not a lot of new features, but there's a couple. There's some behind the scenes features that make it easier for developers who are developing something for an iPad or a Mac to be able to come up with a version of that for the Apple TV, which will be nice. They've got new game controllers coming out. I don't really play games on my Apple TV, but if you do, that'll be there. The things that I think are sort of interesting is we've talked in the past about how Apple's HomeKit technology, Apple offered that to the entire community, and it's now going to be the basis of this thing called Matter, which is going to allow different home automation systems, like Android and Amazon and everybody else, Samsung, that they can all interact with each other. And so, of course, the Apple TV, being a device in your home that's always on, is a natural hub for HomeKit. That's how I use it now. And it could also be a natural hub for Matter. And so that's going to be getting the support for Matter. So, we've been hearing about this new system called Matter for a while now. It will actually be, Apple will actually be using it this fall. And so one of the ways that they'll be using it, if you already own an Apple TV, it will be supporting Matter. So this will just be a way to help all of our devices in our home and talk to each other, all of our smart devices even better, which is really nice. I also thought it was sort of interesting that they were announcing, this one was sort of curious because I saw initial reports that they were going to be supporting the HR. Let me get my letters right on this. It's HR 10.
It's down here too. HR 10 plus.
HR 10 plus. So if you have a 4K television there are different ways to take advantage of 4K and HDR and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
One way is through Dolby Vision, which is, the product that Dolby sells, and the Apple TV already supports that. So if you have a TV that supports Dolby Vision, and the one that I bought last year, this high-end LG TV does, then you're already good to go. But there are some televisions that don't want to pay the licensing fees to Dolby, and so there is an alternative. I think Samsung's an example of this, that they support something called HDR10, and then HDR10 Plus is the new version of it. And so what's sort of curious is when the first beta of tvOS 16 came out, you could see that there was support for HDR10 Plus in there. And then more recently, it's sort of come out, which makes maybe Apple's just trying to get it out, get the licensing in place or whatever it is.
Okay.
They took it out. So, it may well be in there, but if you have a television that you feel like you're not, you currently can't get the best 4K out of your Apple TV because you don't have support for Dolby Vision and also for Dolby Atmos for sound, there may be a solution that will be better for you this fall. I will tell you, as somebody that has Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos, the Apple TV 4K version of the Apple TV is fantastic. I mean, the image on it is just beyond. I've had this new television, Brett, since last November. So I've been using it for over half a year, and I continue to sit down and I am just amazed at how incredible everything looks. It's just beyond.
Well, you mentioned that TV in your post today because we just were covering just a few little minor updates that WWDC announced for the operating system for Apple TV. But if you don't have an Apple TV 4K, you were kind enough to link and let us know. And in fact, I saw this and I haven't pulled the trigger. So maybe no one else buy this yet until I get mine, because I think it's time for me to upgrade. I've been using the whatever the version was right before this that was not 4K.
The HD version, right?
I keep hearing you talk about it and everyone else. Like, I know I've got to get it. And I think I'm just going to have to tell my wife. The 4K version is only $130 now on Amazon, which I think is what is that $40 off?
It's about a $50 discount.
Off.
And what's significant is, I mean, I even checked like Camel, which monitors prices and stuff. I don't think that I've ever seen the Apple TV 4K this cheap before. Yeah. So if you've been thinking about it, if you have a 4K TV, well, it's a no-brainer. You want to get this. But even if you don't, as I mentioned, I used this very model I bought almost a year ago today, and I used it for almost half a year with my just regular HD television, and it was, even though I didn't get the 4K on the screen, it was so much faster. Switching between apps was so much faster. I specifically noticed it when I was looking at photos, because on my older Apple TV it used to take a while for photos to be loaded of my home network, whereas with this new one they just pop up like that. It's so much faster. So of course, if you have a 4K TV, this is a great thing to use with your television. But even if you don't, it's a nice product and you can future proof. Now, of course, there's always the chance that Apple will come out. Why is this big discount coming on? Is Apple going to come out with a new and improved version later this year? I mean, who knows? It's always possible. So I don't know why Amazon's having such a big sale. I certainly wouldn't expect Apple to release any new hardware before the end of this year. But I've been super happy with this box, and I paid $180 for it. If you can pay $150 for it, good for you.
Well, and then by the way, there is the 64 gigabyte model, so you get 32 gigs or 64 gigs, and the 64 gig is also $50 off at $150. Now, am I correct? The only reason you need more storage is if you're downloading movies, which I don't think I do anymore. Everything is streamed. Or maybe for games, if you're storing a bunch of games on there. Yeah. And if you're not, I think the 32 gig is probably more than enough.
Yeah, Apple has not really come out with a good reason to get the higher capacity one.
Yeah, okay,
Having said that, I actually might have the newer one, because the higher capacity one, because I think it's only, like you said, $20 more. And I think I may have been gullible enough to say I'm just going to give Apple an extra $20 in the hopes that maybe I can download more screensavers or something like that. But I mean, honestly, I personally don't know that it has ever made a difference. And every time I read about people that have compared them side by side, the only exception is if you download a whole bunch of games to your Apple TV, well, then you want to have more
That's what I thought.
Space.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like you say, everything else, you're just streaming video anyway. So it doesn't really matter.
I'll just tell you, the reason that this is becoming something that I got to pull the trigger on today is because this is pretty much the only inlet for entertainment now when we sit down. I mean, we used to have the Roku. I know there's the Google devices, Amazon Fire devices. But honestly, today, Jeff, because I think the way that Apple has continued to improve this Apple TV and the software, this is the way we go to Netflix, and this is the way we get to Hulu. This is the way we get Apple TV. This is the way we get Amazon Prime. It's the way we get YouTube. I mean, everything we do now comes. I even have my own, network attached storage here, and we get access to the files on that through Apple TV. Plus, like you mentioned, it's already connected to my iCloud account for the pictures and everything. So I know a lot of other people use many different, items and ways to get in. But, to me, like, I'd rather get a dumb TV. I don't want my TV connected to my Wi-Fi, but I can use this. In fact, even when I travel, I can just take this with me because everything is stored on there. So anyway, I know we were talking too much about the Apple TV.
Digital home.
Right.
And it's a good point because, I have DirecTV at my house, which I've had for a decade. And I don't even know why I still pay for DirecTV. As I think about the last 6 months, there was a single show, which was the Better Call Saul show that I was watching on DirecTV, only because I didn't like watching it on the AMC app on my Apple TV because they had the commercials, and skipping through commercials on a streaming device is a pain. You really can't skip through them. So I was using DirecTV for that. But like, with the exception of that, and maybe every once in a while live news, and of course more and more live stuff is coming to the Apple TV.
Well, exactly.
I think that's all you're going to need. You're not going to need a cable box or a DirecTV box or anything else.
You just mentioning that just real quick, and I didn't mean to spend too much time on the Apple TV, but I've always told people, because we cut cable a long time ago, and people say, well, how do you live with that? And I said, really, the only two things that we miss are live news, just like you said, Jeff, although today I just can stream that from a variety of sources. Sure. And then live sports, which we're not the hugest sports family, but you just on that topic, you had a link today in your post as well that is interesting. We knew a few weeks ago, we talked about Apple signing on with the Major League Baseball, where they show 2 baseball games every Friday night. That was a pretty big deal because MLB is a big name, right? A big sport. And so we thought maybe this could be a precursor for Apple maybe getting NFL games or something. Well, it wasn't quite NFL, but it was what do they call it?
Major League Soccer, MLS.
Major League Soccer.
Yes.
And at first I was like, who's going to be that interested in this? And it's like, it's soccer, like at least in the United States. This isn't like Manchester United from the UK.
This is not Premier League.
And there are some fanatics. I got you. I know you got some very big fans out there, and I love you guys. But it's like, I know that this isn't going to be a big deal, but I'm sure you listened to the same podcast I did. Somebody that's more in the know, Alex Lindsay, was talking about the fact that if Apple can do something incredible with Major League Soccer and show the world, as it were, what they can do with like a full license rights, like with all the games, because that's pretty much what they're going to show, right? Boy, Heidi, is that not going to be like a good resume to then go to the NBA, the NFL, and whatever else they want to go and say, look what we can do here at Apple. And I just thought that was an interesting take on that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. These are big for the people that are the fans, but it's really just Apple proving itself to get into even bigger stuff. Makes perfect sense.
Okay, good. Okay, we got watchOS, tvOS, and something else that I don't know if we talked about. Maybe we just barely mentioned it, but you did a very good job of digging into this a little bit more from WWDC, which is buy now, pay later. What in the world does this mean, and why would Apple even care?
When Apple first started getting into its financial offerings with the Apple, credit card and Apple Pay and all that sort of stuff, it always seemed a little weird to me. It's like Apple's now a bank.
Agreed.
What is this?
Right.
But they are doing more and more with it. And this buy now, pay later system is a perfect example of it. The idea being that, you're going to buy something that, would cost $300 and you don't have $300 right now, but you're going to have it soon. And so why not finance it over time? And Apple, already has a system that if you're buying something that Apple makes, if you're buying an iPhone or an iPad, you can actually pay it off using your Apple Pay or your Apple Card over a period of time. And that's great because it's no interest. So, why not have 12, simple payments over a year or whatever?
Why not?
But with the way that this system works, it's only for 6 weeks. So you're not really delaying it that much. But if you don't think you quite have enough for this paycheck, but you want to put it off, that maybe you can cover over 2 or 3 paychecks. It's no interest. It's no fees. It's just, a way to make it more convenient. And when I first heard this announced at the keynote, I will tell you, Brett, I'm curious if you felt the same way. My first reaction was a little icky because I'm
Yeah.
like, this whole system of getting
Same.
people to buy something they can't afford,
Same.
and then you're going to try to shake them down later with high interest rates and
Same.
everything else. But as folks have dug into this over the last 2 weeks, including the John Gruber article from Daring Fireball that you just showed,
Yeah.
it actually turns out that, first of all, Apple's not doing that. They are not
Right.
charging fees. They're not
Right.
charging interest rates. And what they are doing, according to this article, is they're basically trying to cut off other people doing the same thing, because a lot of other people are now, again, sometimes they'll offer it for more than 6 weeks, so this is a relatively short-term pay later, but
Right.
they're trying to give people an alternative to get away from the ickiness of the industry. And Gruber points out in his article that these other industries, I mean, for folks that are interested in privacy, it's a privacy nightmare. Once you get involved in their tentacles, they get all of your information, and they they make some of their money from you, but then they make some of their money by selling you to all these other pieces. And so, John says that, Apple is preserving privacy by, if you want to do a pay later service, just keep it all within the Apple ecosystem. No one else gets your personal information. No one else is trying to charge you an arm and a leg down the road if you don't make your payments on time. So it sounds a little altruistic. And of course, it's not completely altruistic, because let's be fair, Apple wants you to use Apple Pay. And the more people use Apple Pay, the more businesses into it. Apple makes a tiny bit of a percentage. They want Apple Pay to become, and the Apple credit card to become, entrenched in what you use and how you pay for things. So every little bit helps. So I guess I understand that, but I still am just fascinated that Apple is getting more and more into this industry.
I think some of the ickiness, at least as I'm thinking through this, comes from the history, right? With the financial world.
Exactly.
And like, I remember when I went to college, I signed up with a ton of credit cards thinking I'm a big man on campus, and I got bit by interest all the time, right? And to me, that's where some of this comes from. And I don't know, maybe some of us of a more elderly maturity think about like, well, if I'm going to buy something, I'm going to pay it off in full. If I don't have the money, I'm not going to buy it. But I got to tell you, I have been using this Apple card in fact, I've got it right now for a couple of the iPads that I purchased and the keyboards. I didn't just pay the full entire price. I put it on the Apple card, which I love this article you linked to in CNET. It is a little bit different, right? I did put it on a credit card, but it was from the Apple credit card, and those are actually monthly installments. And, if I don't pay it off in the 12 months, they will charge me interest. But I don't have to worry about it because it's all automatic. Like, it's just going to go on my credit card, right? And I mean, I'm going to see that.
And then you pay no interest, right? It's just 0%.
Exactly. It's the same way. And just the same way, it's like, well, okay, I just like that over the months as opposed to right off the bat. And again, there are still many things that I would just pay for out front, and I don't want to have to worry about this. But the whole buy now, pay later, Apple is certainly not the first company that has been doing this. I think Sezzle is one that's been around for quite a while now, and they're not paying interest. But of course, if you stop paying, they will charge you a pretty hefty interest on there, which is, this is the way that they get around this. And anyway, I'm just trying to think out loud a little bit on why I feel a little bit of ickiness on this. But the ickiness that I can avoid in doing this with Apple, Jeff, that you alluded to already, is that I'm going to trust, honestly, at this point, I trust Apple more with a buy now, pay later than I would probably trust another third-party company, because I know that my privacy is going to be protected, because they've already proven that they're doing that for me on a lot of the other things that I've done. So the jury is still out for me completely on this. I want to see what it looks like in the real world, and if people kind of get bit in the rear end by not paying, or what happens if you're late payment, all that kind of stuff like that. But I am pretty excited. This is what I was alluding to earlier, that Apple is now a financial company. I mean, they are really getting into this. In fact, my daughter and son wanted to go to Chick-fil-A later today, so she needed money. What did I do? Like what I know that you do, Jeff. I just did in messages and sent her some money on the Apple card, right? So like it's such an easy way to be able to do this. Like, I don't want to get cash out anymore. I don't want to have to give her a credit card. Like, I can just so easily do that, and it's so seamless, to the point where I'm almost starting to get annoyed if I go to a store or a coffee shop or something and they don't accept Apple Pay. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Get on board.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, is that enough on buy now, pay later? We'll see. We'll still see what's coming out for that, on sure. Okay, watchOS. tvOS. Buy now, pay later. Let's quickly, we can do this pretty quickly. We talked a lot about the iPad last time, but our friend David Sparks had a nice little post, I thought, which was really nice and balanced on his initial thoughts from Stage Manager. Look in the way that it looks on the iPad. Very good stuff here.
Yeah, and it's nice because this is hands-on. I am not installing the betas on my iPad or my iPhone because I use them to get work done, and I can't have things that crash. And David would tell you the same thing, that don't do it unless you have an extra device. But
he does.
He has hung up his law practice, so he can be a little bit more playing fast and loose. And so he's been trying out the beta version, and of course the beta, it may be different this fall. The shipping version may not look the same as what it does today. With all of those caveats aside, he says it works great. He has some phrases that I like. He has tried it on both the Mac and the iPad. And on the Mac, he calls it a horizontal improvement, meaning it's just an additional another way of dealing with Windows, not necessarily better, not necessarily worse, just like another one on the side.
Because there's already 3 or 4 ways to do that on the Mac, and I use them all, and this would be like another added one. Good.
But on the iPad, he calls it a vertical improvement. You're actually stepping up and getting better because it gives you some new features you've never had before, the ability to switch between the windows, see on the side what windows you have open, so you can just tap on them and quickly get over there, put stuff in bundles. And he says it works really well. So I'm looking for, this is definitely a power user feature. A lot of folks will never touch this at all. You can only take advantage of it if you've got one of the newest iPads with the M1 processor. So unless you bought your iPad within the last year or so, it's not going to even support it. Now, of course, going forward, future iPads will support it. And next thing you know, we'll get to a point where everybody has an iPad that's powerful enough to support this. But for if you are a power user and you think you might want to use this, I was really on the edge of my seat wondering, are the initial reports going to be, oh, this is just a disaster, or were the initial reports going to be, hey, this actually works? And David Sparks and other people that have been using it for the past 10 days or so have says, you know what, this is improvement. This is nice.
There were some people talking about the fact that, Stage Manager, both on the Mac and the iPad, was this the result of the two teams internally saying, hey, that looks good on the Mac, let's try to bring it to the iPad, or vice versa? And both you and David linked to a really good story, I thought, in TechCrunch, where they're talking with Craig Federighi from Apple. And it was interesting, Jeff. He said, no, actually, both teams came to almost the same conclusion on their own, almost independently, at least is the way that I read the story here. And it was just nice that it just sort of meshed and melded together.
Yeah. In fact, related to that, I didn't even link to it today, but I think it was on Daring Fireball this week that he found a former Apple employee who had worked at the company, I want to say 15 years ago or more. And he actually showed off some stuff that he had been working on in Apple that looks almost exactly like Stage Manager. And he mentioned that a lot of his former teammates that he worked with when he was in Apple, guess what they're working on today? Stage Manager. So it just goes to show you that some of these ideas have been in incubation for a very, very long time. And so maybe it wasn't an active development for that entire 15 years or so, however long it's been, but it has a long history. People have been kicking the tires for a while, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, what makes sense. And all of this is, exciting for me because it makes me hope that by the time it's finally released this fall, it'll be fully baked and it'll be ready to use. It's awesome.
And like you said, this is just the initial developer beta, which means that really it's only for people that are signed into Apple's developer website. What you think maybe about a month or 2, month and a half or so, Apple will release what they call a public beta, which at that point, I may not be able to hold off much longer, Jeff. I may have to install that on my iPad because I'm just so excited, to see how this looks in the real world. So we'll let people know when that comes about. HomeKit. Wow, we are just really covering the whole gamut here. But I know you're a pretty big fan of HomeKit, and this was a really neat article quickly that you linked to from Bradley Chambers in 9 to 5 Mac about, hey, even if you are a renter in a home and, you don't want to rewire the home or something to have some HomeKit, I thought this was really neat that he covers some good gadgets here that you can use even if you're in a rental home.
Yeah, he didn't even cover everything that he could have covered, but I think that he hit some of the highlights. Bradley Chambers writes about HomeKit stuff all the time for 9to5Mac and does a great job. So I always enjoy his articles on HomeKit.
Yeah.
And this one was a good idea because, you know, a lot of the HomeKit stuff, you're going to be sort of changing things about your house. But even if you're a renter and you don't want to like install anything that you can't take with you, he has some nice suggestions. I mean, I will say my favorite HomeKit devices for lights are the Lutron switches, which does require you to replace the wall switch. I will tell you, I have done some of them myself. I've also done some that I've had an electrician who happened to be at my house anyway do it for me. But you know, if you know your way around electricity, you almost can do it yourself. And so I can totally imagine a renter maybe replacing the light switch with the Lutron and then replacing it back when they leave. Whatever, you know what your level of sophistication is. That's sort of the my handyman nature is very small, and that is right at the edge for me. But for other folks, they eat that stuff for breakfast and would think nothing more about, you know, changing back stuff. So, but then some of the options that he talks about are things that are truly independent, like something that just sticks into an outlet and then provides a smart, a HomeKit smart appliance that you can turn a lamp on and off and stuff like that. So it's just good to know that you know, even if you don't want to change something about the place that you're renting, you can still use HomeKit too.
Lastly, before we get to our quick tips, this was a fantastic video that you linked to, including something I know we talked about last week, so we won't spend a lot of time, but Rene Ritchie, he's up in Canada, and just really a fantastic YouTuber now. He was a longtime reporter for iMore and some other outlets like that. But we talked about Passkeys last week, and I think we just kind of gave everybody, you know, the main takeaway I think that most people have heard me talk about Passkeys is it's going to replace passwords. And while that is correct, I think there's a lot more to it probably than that. And there's questions that you and I had, like, what about 1Password? I'm using 1Password now. How in the world do I get into a website without a password? Some people just can't envision that. And this little video you linked to at the end of your post today was fantastic from Renee. And it just goes through like how it works. And really, I think he does a really good job. I wish I could find a little screenshot here. Here's one of them where he shows like what it looks like to have a public key on one end, right, on the website, and a private key on your own phone, and you can biometrically then authenticate yourself through your phone or something. Just a really good video. I'm so glad that you linked to it, and I'll make sure that it puts in the show note so that all of you listeners can go and watch it if you really want to kind of get an idea of how Passkey is going to work. It also occurred to me quickly, Jeff, that this technology is something that's been around for a long time, right? It's really just PGP in a way, but it's definitely an evolution of it. And it's just really, really neat to kind of see Renee dig into this.
Yeah, the foundations of it have been around for a long time, which is good because it's a solid foundation. But what they're doing with it to completely get rid of passwords, that is brand new. And that's going to be very exciting. This video that you said about 11 minutes long, the first half of the video, Renee sort of explains what it is. And you and I talked about that last week. The second half of the video is nice because he then addresses what are the questions that you might have. Things like, will I still use a regular password manager? What if I get to a new phone? What if I get a new device? You know, and a lot of the questions that I had, he then addresses them and comes up with the answer. And there are a few things that we don't yet know the answer to, but there are some things that we are starting to know the answer to. So when I finished watching his video, I had a much greater understanding of how this new world may work. And again, I'm excited because if you had just as a few months ago, if you had said, will we have a future with a replacement for passwords? My answer would have been maybe, but I mean, that's probably what, 10 years away. And if someone says, oh no, you'll actually be using that before the end of 2022, I would have been like, get out of here. No way. But it looks like the early steps are coming soon, which is incredibly exciting.
Very exciting. Very exciting. Let's move to In the Know. And boy, I got a fun one. I usually try to get into a good tip or something, Jeff, but for this week, I just wanted to have a little bit fun. This is introducing the Floppotron 3.0. And I don't know if I could even really explain it, Jeff. You just have to go and watch the video. This is a gentleman that has taken, I mean, I wish I could say his name, but I think he's in Poland, Paweł Jadrozniak. And he has taken old floppy drives, like the 3.5-inch floppy drives, just the ones that you remember. And he has somehow brilliantly wired them all together and put it through multiple circuit boards. Some he 3D printed himself. He has added some spinning hard drives and some scanners as well to create the Floppotron 3.0, which, by the way, indicates that he has had a 1.0 and a 2.0, and he alludes to that in this video. And he puts it all together to create a musical computer hardware orchestra. It is a sight and a sound to behold. You must go and watch this video on here. I can't play it. I can't really even do it justice on here, but I can't stop watching this. I just love it. Not to mention the fact that it's just so brilliant in what he can do. But Jeff, it was so nostalgic for me because number one, I'm hearing those old sounds of the floppy drives that we just kind of took for granted, like the old modem sound, right? And I'm hearing the old clicks and clacks of those spinning hard drives. And I'm hearing when I used to have a flatbed scanner and that and all those sounds. It's really fun, and I just can't stop watching the Floppotron here.
When I saw that you were showing off this video today, it was not one that I had seen before, and I just loved watching it. It was just so much fun. And you're right. I mean, nowadays, all of our equipment is basically quiet, right? You know, the iPhone and the iPad make no noise when you use them.
Right.
Your computer might have a fan noise, which is maybe a faint hum, but I 100% remember technology, especially way back when in the 80s and 90s. You know, when you used a hard drive, you heard noise, you heard knocking, you heard whistles, you heard hums. And so to take those hums and is like, you know, well, this hum is sort of in the key of C, this hum is sort of like the D, this is sort of an E, and to put it all together and make music is purely delightful. It's just so funny.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
The main video that you showed me is sort of the introductory video, but when you know how you get to the end of a YouTube video and it suggests other ones, you know, that are related. There were some other ones that were from the same artist. I think you call him an artist. He's making music.
Yes. Oh, and, absolutely.
Like they did a cover of the Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yes.
And it was so funny because not only does he use all of his hard drives and scanners, but at one point he's got an old 56K modem that like plays some of the dial tones, because you remember in the old days they used to play, and it does part of the song, and I just busted out laughing. It, you know, maybe it just shows my age, but this is great fun. So I highly encourage folks to watch this. This is too fun.
And I even link, he has like his whole own website, and if you really want to dig into exactly how, I mean, he even has the schematics here and how he built it, and he's even thankfully has his own Wikipedia page on here now as well. The Floppotron 3.0. I'll put the link in the show notes. Jeff, what is your tip, whether it's fun or not? That's fun enough for us, right? Give us something more serious.
You can't beat the Floppotron 3.0. Mine is a messages tip. So last night we were sitting around the table at my house, and we were it was actually sort of strange. My wife had sent a text message to both me and my son, and I got it, but he didn't, and we never did figure out why. He eventually had to like send a message to my wife, and then we got an alert in our phone that my son's phone number had changed. I don't know. Sometimes messages can be weird, but in the process of troubleshooting that, and fortunately we did figure it out, I noticed that I use messages different from the way that my son and then my wife do. My son and I both use a feature that came out in iOS 14 2 years ago, where you can pin messages conversations to the top of the messages screen. So when I open up the messages app, the very top part of my screen doesn't show a message going, you know, left and right. It actually shows a little icon corresponding to the picture of the person that I'm communicating with. Or if you have a group conversation, it will have like a tiny little picture of like my wife and my son and my daughter if it's a group. And my wife, on the other hand, she wasn't using that feature at all and wasn't even aware of it. And I think it's a totally useful feature, because if you don't use pinned conversations, you will see your most recent conversation at top, and then your second most recent, and then your third most recent. And that's nice. But sometimes there are people that you communicate regularly, even if it's not necessarily the last time that you did a text message. And so you want to have easy access to them at the very top. And so I have, you know, you can have up to 9 up there.
Okay. 9.
And I've got all 9 filled up. My wife's up there, my son, my daughter. Brett, you're one for me. You were part of my 9.
You are too.
There you go. And so it's because we communicate for the podcast all the time. And it's just useful that, you know, maybe you and I haven't texted each other in 2 weeks or something like that, but I still want easy access to be able to just tap your face and then instantly communicate with you. So if you're not using messages, the way that you open up the messages app, and at the top left, you'll see a button called edit. And if you tap on edit, you will see something about editing your pinned conversations. And again, you can edit what's up there. You can also just drag something up there too once you have one there. But we'll have a link in the show notes to the Apple support page, which describes how to do it. It's very simple to do. And once you start having pinned conversations at the top of your messages app, I don't think you'll ever go back to the other way. And you're not giving up the old way, because At the bottom of those up to 9 pins, you will then see the
Right.
conversations linked in order. So you're not giving up the old way. You're just adding these shortcuts at the very top. It has been a major improvement in the way that I use messages for the last few years.
It saves me time because just like what you were saying, Jeff, sometimes I have several people, that I have conversations with. I can go in and I can pull that down and I can search for a person's name, right? And it'll pull up if it's a certain conversation that I'm looking for. But that takes too much time for me. I love using pins. I'm so glad you use this as a tip here. And by the way, I'll even add quickly on this. I just did this yesterday because I have it for several, not just for my wife, but then I have my wife and my daughter and me, right? And then I have my wife, my son and me. And then I have just my 2 kids with me. And actually yesterday I added them as a group because you can do pinned of just single conversations, right, Jeff? But you can have groups up there pinned too. I know you just talked about that. But in my case, I had it where I could see both of the little pictures of my 2 kids for their pinned conversation, right? And instead of having the 2 separate pictures, I tapped on it and having their names, I went in and you can actually go in and you can edit the name of that group. So I call them kiddos. And I added a separate picture where it has a photo I took of both of them together. So it's not their separate pictures. I know that's not the best way to describe it,
but a good idea.
You can customize them on
that's
there.
That's a nice idea.
So like for our family, I have a picture of a selfie that we all took when we were traveling one time, right? So I just know, even by just looking at it, the picture that it's a separate picture that I added on there that I can jump into. Or if it's just my 2 kids, I just can just look at the picture because it's a photo that I took and I can customize what that picture looks like when I pin it. So, but I'm so glad you're covering that because that's a great tip in messages.
Yeah, that's a great tip on a tip. Awesome.
Yeah. Bonus tips, lots of tips. Okay, my friend. Wow. I am so glad that we were able to cover all the rest of the stuff that we didn't get to last week at WWDC. And we got some exciting things planned for the next couple of weeks. But I tell you what, we'll save all of that and I'll talk with you next week, Jeff.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.